Welcome again, class, to CIT 360. Yes, we're in week 1. Seems like there's a lot of stuff to do, but I wanted to talk a little bit about one thing that sometimes trips up students, and that's using Git, G-I-T. Git is it's a software repository very commonly used in industry. In fact, this is one of those things that we don't always do that well in academia, and that is introduce things that are very widely used in industry for team management, code collaboration, and so forth. And so you get an opportunity to use Git, which really does that. We use a repository, an online repository called GitHub, which is freely available. You may have used it for one of your other classes. What I want to talk a little bit about here is how to get that set up if you haven't set it up before, because it can be a little bit tricky, and a lot of the information you find out on the internet is a few years old and doesn't work with different versions of Eclipse and so forth and so on. So I'm going to take this time to walk through with you how to set that up. And I hope that this will help you to more quickly get everything configured so that you can start doing development work. Thank you. All right, so let's talk about some things that you need to do before you get into the rest of this little video lecture. The first thing that you need to do is to download eGit. eGit is a plugin for Eclipse. If you go to eclipse.org/egit/download, you can get the download for it. The way that you do this is you come down here. This is the latest version. You copy this update site. If you haven't already done this at one point or another in Eclipse, you come into your Eclipse. I'm using Luna. This should work for most of the newer versions. You go to Help. You go to Install New Software. You copy and paste that URL, that update URL here. It'll churn for a little while. You select eGit from the list down in here, and you go through the install process. Okay. So again, you need to do that before you really do anything else in setting up Git. That's a requirement. So from this point on, I'm assuming that you have that installed. One thing that you can do to kind of make this a little bit easier is if you go up to Window, Show View, and Other in Eclipse, you want to find the Git repositories view. That's what this little guy is right here, down in the lower left-hand side. So, okay, so I'm going to take you through the steps to really integrating with GitHub. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a local repository on your workstation. Okay, so right here, create a new local Git repository. It will automatically kind of choose a spot for you. You can leave this as a bare repository. Click Finish, and here you just have a bare, empty, totally empty repository. Okay. Now, the next thing you want to do is log into GitHub. You should have already created an account with GitHub, and so once you have that account, click on Repositories. You'll see over here. First of all, I've done this enough times just to figure it out that I have a whole bunch of repositories I don't use. I just haven't deleted them yet. Anyway, there's an option here for new. This is for a new repository, so I'm going to call it CIT 360. Now, you can make it public, and then, which is probably what you want to do initially. You can always change it to private later. You can click here, initialize this with a README, and then click Create Repository. And so it gives you this. Now, if I come down here, it says HTTPS clone URL. I'm going to click on that and copy that to the clipboard because I'm going to need that here in a minute. All right. Now I'm going to go back to Eclipse. So here's my Eclipse. I'm going to create myself a new project, and I'm going to call it CIT 360. You can have more than one project in your repository, but for this, I'm just going to create it that way. That's fine. And okay, so here it is. So now what I want to do is, if I right-click on that project and come down here to Team, I'm going to share this project using Git. Click Next. I'm going to select my repository. Okay, let me create it. I thought I had that. There it is. That's my base repository, and I'm going to put in here, I'm going to call it CIT 360. Finish. It shows you here that we've attached this with that. And now you can click Finish. Okay. Now, we need to associate the repository with your remote repository, okay? So what I'm going to do is, down here in the Git repository area, I have remotes. I'm going to right-click on remote and create a remote. And yes, I'm going to call it CIT 360. And I'm going to click OK. Now, it's going to ask me to put in, basically we're going to put in that URI. So click Change here. Now, I've done this before, so that's why this thing seems to remember me so well. But you would copy and paste your URI right here, and it should automatically put the rest of this in here. Obviously, you're going to have to type in your username and password, and then you're going to click Finish. And then we're going to click Save. Okay. All right. Now, let's put something in here. Under Source, I'm going to add a package. Just going to call it Test. And I'm going to create a new Java class. Okay. All right. So now I have an empty Java class. Now, with Git, anytime you add a new element, you're going to have to tell Git that it is a new element. Okay. And you can do it down here. So I can say, if I right click on my class and I come down here to team, I'm going to add to index, and it will actually add anything. It also added the package all the way up. Okay. Now you'll notice that there's a little, I don't know what it is, plus or something there. That just means that it hasn't been committed. So the next thing I'm going to do is come down here to team, and I'm going to commit it. Everything has to be committed in order for it to make it from your working directory into the local repository. Okay. So you've got a little working directory. That's where it's storing the actual source code. You've got a repository. That's where it's basically storing all of the, it stores the code, but it stores it in a different fashion. It stores the diffs of it, basically. And then you have your remote repository, which is GitHub. I know it's kind of confusing, but to commit, I need to put in a little message here. I'm just going to put this was our initial commit. And then I am going to, I can't see it, submit it or commit it. Okay, now you notice it changed. Okay, so once we've committed it, now we need to send it to the remote. So I'm going to right click here at the project level, go back down to team, remote, push. Remote's going to push it to the remote server. You should already have this configured. I'm going to click next here. Now, one thing I want to show you, let me just kind of move this out of the way. Down here under my repository, I click down on branches, local, and notice I have a branch here called master. And notice to the right, it says initial commit. That's the comment, or at least the first couple of words of the comment that I typed. That tells me the branch that I just did my commit on. So when I come back here to remote, I need to select that branch. And then I'm going to select add all branch specs. And I'm going to force an update on that. And then I'm going to go to next. Now you'll notice that it's saying here it's going to push from master on the local side to master in the repository. And then I'm going to finish. And it just kind of shows me that it's done the job, that it was successful. Okay, so let's move this thing out of the way for a minute and let's go back here. And I'm going to click back on my repository. And it says here that it was last committed a few minutes ago. And you see here this test package. And here's my file, so it's committed. So that's the process that you're going to go through. One thing you have to be kind of careful of is you can have multiple branches. And when you have multiple branches, you have to be careful which one you're looking at. Master is the basically the first branch. It's the root branch. And then everything comes from that. So let's just show one more thing here. I'm going to come back to my Java class. I'm going to select, let's do, can't type today. So we just added a couple of things to it. I'm saving it. I'm going to commit the change, added variables. I'm going to commit it. Okay. Now, if you notice down here in the repository, we've got our master, and now you see how it's changed to added variables. Okay. Now again at the project, I'm going to remote push. Next. Again, we're on the master branch. Add business spec. I always force it. Next. Now you notice it picked up added variables as that commit, and then finish. And now if I move this one aside and go back and click on this again, there we go. So I hope that going through this process will help you to make sure you know kind of how this works. Now it can get a little bit tricky when you start using it as a team. You're going to want different branches for each of your team members, and then you're going to also want then to merge those branches back into the master or another higher level trunk or higher level branch when you're ready. And so that gets a little bit more tricky. And again, I would highly recommend that you familiarize yourself with this user guide for eGit, because it'll talk about exactly how to do each of those things. And that will help to make it much easier to do the work that we do here in this class. Thank you.